Sva.
Hello, hello.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ljubljana Talks.
Good morning.
This is already 115th edition of Ljubljana Talks, and today we have a lot of crazy and amazing guests ready for you. But first of all, Jan.
Yes, Gorazd.
Yeah, you have a lot of things behind you. You are in Frankfurt for 3 days.
I've been in Frankfurt since Friday. Yes, that's
Okay.
true. And as a member of ICA board, we had meetings throughout the weekend. So it was very exciting to see how the state of the industry and everything that's happening with the association market. And the whole excitement about what is happening here in Frankfurt these days is really tremendous. ICA, as the largest association in the industry in this regard, is really pushing ahead. I think we're very ambitious, and but at the same time consistent with a very good outview for the strategy. With the strategy, and from what I can say and what we can say, we're in the right direction.
Jan, what are some trends and what is the zeitgeist of the industry, by your opinion, being part of this board meeting?
Well, I think the first thing that I can say is the community is growing, the community is developing. It is pushing forward an agenda that, we want to be more resilient. We want to be above the day-to-day happenings on Twitters and other stuff. So I think that the general trend is good, and that is important. So not looking at what's growing globally from day to day, but in general. I would just add to this that what we can see from what we are doing at ICA, but also with other associations, there are certain worries in the membership, of course, global stability being the first of them. But at the same time, we're trying to tackle that. We understand that, just like we've grown better out of the COVID situation, this is our opportunity to become better as an industry in the future as well.
Thanks, Jan. And now we are getting ready for the first guest we have today.
That is
and
true.
In short time, in 1 minute, we will have a nice conversation with somebody who is out of our industry.
That is true.
I'm really
Sarah
looking
Furness
forward.
Is coming, and we're very excited. So see you in a minute. Kam je šla? Hello everybody and welcome to Ljubljana Talks here from IMEX in Frankfurt in 2025. With Gorazd Čad, we have a couple of extremely interesting episodes in front of us, and we're kicking it off with the lovely Sarah Furness here with us, who's going to talk about being a pilot and the meetings industry. And Sarah, welcome and thank you for coming to Ljubljana Talks.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an absolute delight to be here.
Having you here, and you will be doing some talks and some lectures later on during the IMEX Educational. Of course, what would you say are the parallels that you see between being a combat pilot and the leadership in the meetings industry?
Yeah, so a couple spring to mind. The first sort of obvious parallel is that the events industry is very fast-paced, it's fast-changing, it's dynamic, there's a lot of pressure to perform. And probably I sense that often it's quite hard to get feedback and you only really know if it's going wrong. So you have to be quite resilient, you have to be able to perform under pressure. So that's the kind of obvious parallel. But I think the other sort of slightly more poetic parallel, if you like, is as a helicopter pilot, we understand that our job is to get people where they want to be versus where they are right now. So, you know, pilots, we love to talk about ourselves, right? We've got great big egos, but actually you work out fairly quickly that you're the person that's getting them somewhere. Actually, I think it's the same in the events industry. People come to an event because they're looking for a solution to a problem, or they're looking for that missing piece of their jigsaw. So actually the event industry is about getting people from where they are to where they want to go, and you've got to tap in to your audience, understand where they're trying to go to deliver a really good output. And it's exactly the same as a helicopter pilot. You're actually just the taxi driver getting them from A to B, and I think the moment you realize that is the moment
very complicated taxi.
Very complicated. But I think the moment you realize that, and you actually weirdly realize it's not about you, it's about where people are trying to get to and how you get them there.
Amazing, Sarah. There is always a co-pilot with you. So why is that so? And is it possible that you fly the helicopter by yourself? And if my next question is, what if AI will be capable to fly? Is it possible, or this is just...
I mean, sure, right? So yes, in the helicopter I flew, there was always 3 crew. So co-pilot and then someone down the back who we call the crewman. So yeah, you're definitely a team and you delegate jobs. You can't do everything at once, or you can try, but you'll do it badly. So you definitely delegate the tasks and you sort of divide and conquer. And I'm sure there's a parallel there with the events industry as well. Yes.
The role of a pilot that we're trying to, you know, the way that we're discussing it now really does sound very similar to a meetings organizer.
Yes.
You know, you control the buttons, you see when something's blinking, when what buttons to be pushed, and you know the speed. You can adjust a lot of things within an event, right? And of course the preparation is crucial, and then the follow-up and all that. And in many analyses, it is usually pilots, firefighters and event managers that are described as the most stressful jobs. Would you agree with that comparison?
So I can only speak about being a pilot, really. Although I would consider myself as part of the events industry now because I give speeches for a living. And my partner would definitely testify to the fact that I get very stressed because I'm preparing and rehearsing, I'm debriefing and refining. So I'm applying a very similar mindset to speaking that I did to flying. And maybe that's just because of how I am, but I actually think that it does make a natural kind of translation. So I can see that events management is stressful. I think you missed off moving house. That's supposed to be very stressful too. I don't know where that fits, but I feel that there's some logistics in there.
As a job, moving house.
I mean, I'm just saying it's one of the most stressful things that you can go through as a human. So
probably.
Sarah, why to be a pilot? You know, can you explain your story? I'm really looking forward. Tell us more about why you decided for becoming a pilot and so on.
So the truth is, I watched a film when I was 12. You might have heard of it. It's Top Gun.
I watched Top Gun. I will not say how many times.
Yeah, okay, so I watched it many times.
Okay.
And I watched this film and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then I remember like the next day, I went for a walk with my family, and older than me, and he had this leather jacket, and it was a bit like the one that Maverick wore. And I put it on, said to my dad, "Do you think I look cool?" And he said, "I can totally see you as a pilot, Sarah." And my 12-year-old brain just went, "Cool, that's what I'm going to do," basically. So that was kind of it.
And it was difficult. Can you explain also that? What is the process actually?
So it started for me by joining the Air Cadets when I was 13, and so you sort of get kind of involved in that way of life from a young age. But then the first thing you do is you go through officer and aircrew selection, which is at RAF Cranwell. But back in those days, it was same-sex syndicates. It was all girls applying at the same time to be a pilot, and only one of us passed the aptitude test to be a pilot, which apparently was me. So I remember at that point realising how statistically unlikely it was that I was going to make it. But I got through, and then the next thing that happened is they said that my arms were too short, which is a common thing for women because we tend to be smaller, and the planes are not designed around people, they design the people around the planes, right? So I basically had to stretch my arms to get into the Air Force, which is a whole story.
What a story, yeah. Go on.
I mean, you could easily be too tall for a tank driver as well. So there's, the military has a lot of interesting applications for different body types, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I know, in the spirit of fairness, I know men that were turned away because the leg, the femur, if it's too long, when they eject, their knees get cut off. So you couldn't be too tall either. So you couldn't be too short, you couldn't be too tall.
There you go. So talking about physical, handicaps and so forth, but there's also the mental element, of course. And in the meetings industry, more and more we talk about mental wellness, mental well-being, taking care of your mental state. I would imagine that is the same in your case.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's something that can creep up on you. I think if you're in this industry, in the flying world, you probably pride yourself on being quite resilient, and you're probably selected because you appear quite resilient. And I think something that inevitably some of us have learned the hard way is that everybody's breakable. And you don't get prizes or extra medals for working harder, for never seeing your children, for never sleeping. There's no extra medal in that for you. So you actually need quite a lot of discipline. Self-care is it's really easy to see that as a luxury or something that doesn't apply to me. But I've seen people fall foul of that, myself included. If you don't look after yourself, then it starts to show.
What would you say are the signs to watch out for? Because I think we all kind of, go, oh, I'm okay, and yeah, I'm stressed, but that's just a part, and I'm stronger than this, and these things compile. So What would you say we need to watch out for?
So in the military, we're big on discipline, obviously, being on time and, being smart and all the rest of it. And so what we were taught to look for as leaders was anything that manifests as indiscipline might actually be there's something going on underneath. But really, the first sign is a change in behavior. So, when you've been working with someone and you do, you live in each other's pockets, you will know what they're like. And when they start to behave differently, that's usually a sign that there's a reason for that. So you need to be curious about why that's happened.
I mean, but you cannot choose your teammates, am I right? In the army. Your co-pilots and so on. So that's a big difference between our industry. Anyhow, we can create good teams actually, but is it like that in the army or not?
So you do. So I was a squadron leader, which meant I did have some agency over who was in my team. Okay. And I did, select people that I thought would be a good fit. And then also when you're flying, you crew up people. And you sort of crew them up depending on their strengths, their personality types, how you think they're going to get on with each other. So there is a reasonable amount of thought that goes into it. So you maybe don't choose your team, but you can choose how you put that team together, I suppose.
And I'm thinking a lot about, you are training for non-normal situation. You were trained for that, but you want to achieve a comfort zone inside the cockpit. Am I right? So how does it fit together, these two things? So you have all the backups and everything probably in the helicopter, but
yeah,
you're training for unbelievable situations. So how this fits together,
Yeah, so we have a phrase in the military, train hard, fight easy.
Yeah.
So we train a lot, and actually that's the difference between the military and events, because you're on your front line every day, right? Whereas actually we spend most of our time at home training, and we spend a small portion on the front line. So we train a lot. But I guess the principle is how you kind of measure up when the pressure is really on is a sum of all of the training that you've done previously. And so we train really hard. We train hard, fight easy, so that when the pressure is really on you, you don't have to think. It's kind of a natural, automatic.
Back of the brain.
Yeah, exactly. So we work really hard on that, and also on building that trust with. It's an amazing feeling, yeah.
You were mentioning quite a few things. We spoke about the elements of stress and recognizing the importance of mental state. How about emotions? So how would you deal with emotional states? Sometimes flying in a helicopter, you're in a military, you're making tough decisions. You have to be prepared to make tough decisions. And as you said, in a debrief, probably those emotions would come back. How would you deal with those emotions?
I think there's two things. One is compartmentalizing. So the best pilots weren't necessarily the ones that made no mistakes. They were the ones that could compartmentalize them in the moment and not let it kind of then run their narrative for the rest of the day. So they're able to kind of put it in a box, but they're then also able to revisit. And that's something I sort of learned quite late in life, was honouring your emotions is really important. If you sort of just keep shoving them away or trying to drown them out with however you cope with things, in the military often it was booze, that's changing now. But eventually...
We know this also in the meetings industry quite well.
Yeah, the work hard, play hard. And the thing is, it will always come back to bite you eventually. So I think there's a moment to let it go and focus on flying the aircraft. But there's also a moment to honour the emotion and to sit with it and to give it the respect it deserves. And I think for a lot of people, that's the harder one to do.
Everything that you're saying, I can really apply to, my experience in the meetings industry. Often it's this stress throughout the day, as you said, work hard, play hard, kind of an ideology. What would you say is your message that you're trying to get through to the meetings industry from your experience and your point of view?
Oh, that is such a good question. And the thing is, I've learned so much from the meetings and the events industry. And I wish I'd known them when I was a pilot, actually. I suppose, kind of back to my previous sort of message, which was, it's actually not about you. In the events industry, you're serving others. And I think you need to keep your eye on that and keep remembering why you're doing it. But I think it's easy to lose yourself in that. And I could see that happen in the military, where you're so much about the team and you're so much about serving the customer. Some people weren't quite sure who they were at the end of the day. So I think you need a strong sense of self.
Retirement situation.
Yeah, and some people don't leave the military because they're so lost in the group identity. They're not really sure who they are. And I think in a weird way, because I was a female, so I was a bit of an outlier, it kind of forced me to figure out who I was. And I think that really helped me in the end, because I had to have a strong sense of self. So maybe I would say the same thing to the events industry, is like, you've got to be able to look in the mirror and know who you are.
I have quite similar question. What we can learn from the pilots, and vice versa, what pilots can learn from us,
Yeah.
Is there anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, pilots could definitely learn that it's not about the pilots, right? The pilots are there to get people from A to B, right? And I think, and I'm saying this with love, sometimes you can sort of get drunk on your own Kool-Aid, because it's quite cool being a pilot. You get to wear the flying suit, you get to wear the Ray-Bans, you can get a little bit kind of high on the whole.
Tom Cruise is there always.
Absolutely. Yeah. Every pilot joined because of that film. And I think there's nothing wrong with having a bit of pride. But I think it's just about finding the right balance of pride, but that not be sort of overtaking kind of who you are, and just remembering at the end of the day, you're there to do a job. So sort of keeping that humility, I think, is quite important.
Very good. And what is your message to teenagers around Europe who wants to become pilots?
Persist. I got told when I was 16, I was told by the doctor, and I remember he said it very clearly because my arms were too short, and he said, let me put it in words that you can understand. He said, you will never be a pilot. That's what he said to me. And 3 years later, I was flying a plane. So don't take the first answer. Just kidding.
I have one more question, and then we'll go to the fire questions, because Ljubljana Talks are short and sweet and full of content. If we talk about, in the military, after an experience, you would share experience. And in the meetings industry, we like to do the same. Sometimes it's very difficult, though, to say that what we would do in certain of our Ljubljana Talks variations, we would talk about fuck-ups.
Yes.
And those fuck-ups are actually that learning curve, that opportunity to get better. Would you do the same in the military? And do you have an example of where you learned something when that kind of impact you when you did a mistake?
Yeah. So it's actually quite central to what I talk about. And I'm really glad you asked that question, actually, because I think it's something that, particularly military aviation, we're quite good at. And it sounds like a glib. Nobody gets out of bed to crash a helicopter, right? But I did. We understand, because we're so close to death, we understand that there is no way you're going to get out of bed to screw up intentionally. So we all kind of implicitly understand that mistakes are honest. Nobody meant to make the mistake, and that means that anyone else could have made the same mistake. So we need to talk about them, we need to share them. And actually giving sort of peer feedback, being able to sit in a space where, it's not going to come back on you, but you can share your mistakes, whether that's in the bar or over a coffee or whatever. That is a really powerful bonding moment, but you learn so much in those conversations that happen in the sides. And we did have a routine way of doing, which was the debrief. So after every mission, we debrief. And that was really good. But just as importantly, it's the chat that happens in the crew room afterwards, and sort of having that vulnerability, being able to laugh about it a little bit. But actually, that's where lots of learning happens.
Sarah, last but not least, I want to ask you what people will miss if they will not come to your presentation today. Can you just wrap up a little bit? And I still have one question. Will AI replace you or pilots? I need to ask that.
Probably, yeah. I mean, if you do come to my talk, you will discover that I have crashed a few times, and the obvious conclusion is a robot would be better at flying than me. So, I mean, I would replace me with AI if I could, right?
I think that example, of pilot Sally, who landed in the East River, I believe.
Yeah.
He proved that AI wasn't better than him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's the military judgment that we're paid for, right? I mean, undoubtedly, a computer can fly a plane with more precision than a pilot can, a human being. But it's the decision making. I think we're a long way off being able to replicate that. And the human, the ethical decisions. I flew special forces missions where we were capturing, bad guys and having to make quite difficult decisions about, things that will stay with you for the rest of your life. I had to make a decision whether or not to leave a man to die on the side of a hill, because I knew that if I continued, I was going to crash the helicopter into the side of the hill. And I chose to leave someone on the side of a hill and save my crew. I think we're a long way off AI being able to make those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, those are tough decisions, and I think you made the round once. You're still here. We usually finish with a round of fire questions.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with a different one. It's not going to be either or, but I'm going to ask you, what would be your bird of choice? If you could choose any helicopter or any plane that you could fly, or what would it be?
Or bike. Yeah.
Oh, you're testing my loyalty now. Gosh. So I think probably the coolest helicopter in the world is the Huey. There's something about the noise of the blades, the fact that it kind of flew in the jungle in Vietnam, the fact that it used to chop its way out of the jungle. I don't know. I think every helicopter pilot has read the book Chicken Hawk, and we've all got a real love for Hueys. So I think the Huey is probably going to be the coolest helicopter.
Amazing. I will finish with a simple question. Virtual or live events, what is your opinion? You can ask shortly or you can answer shortly. So virtual or live events?
Virtual or live events? I mean, 100% live for me, because I think it's about the connection, and I find that really hard to do that kind of to a screen. So, yeah.
Sarah, thank you very, very much for taking your time to do a Ljubljana talk. And it was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Stay tuned. More Ljubljana Talks coming up shortly.
We didn't really follow the...